The Sentinel is known to be reliable, fearless, disciplined, consistent, courageous, motivated, and skillful.
So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances.
All these qualities start from the mind. Your mind can be your worst enemy or your most powerful weapon.
The world becomes your library to help you become better at your craft.
Is this the dagger?
Learn how to achieve greatness and tap into the Sentinel mindset.
This episode is brought to you by The Arena. The Arena focuses on helping law enforcement and security professionals achieve their ultimate work experience, curriculum, and fitness goals. Visit thearenatoronto.com.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this amazing, wonderful day. I'm so excited today because I have somebody here that is someone that not only do I call a friend, but he's been on our podcast on another platform when it was Standing in the Six back in the days. This individual, what gravitates so much towards him is that his heart. He has an incredible heart. And there isn't even backstory to the story of how I met this individual, which we'll probably get into another time. But I'm talking about today Muhammad Lila, who is someone that is, I'm going to say, he is something or someone that everyone should try to embody when it comes to his heart. And I love that about him. Muhammad, I'm giving you this praise, man, because I truly feel like that it's not just words. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Constantine. I loved the first time we did this dance.
Yes.
Second dance is always better. You got better moves, better music, all that stuff. I'm glad to be here. I love your new setup, man. It's gorgeous.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. And for those listening, who is Muhammad? Because we're going to give you some B-roll here. So Muhammad has had an extensive journey and career in media as a journalist. He's worked for, I'm going to make sure I get these all right, City TV.
Yep.
He's worked for CNN.
Yep.
He's worked for CBC.
That's right.
And is there any more outside of those?
ABC News.
And ABC News. And he is amazing at what he does. And back in 2018, when we had him on the show, we were talking about a concept that was very true to his heart. He was talking about what he is today, which is the CEO and the founder of Goodable.
I remember that conversation really well. And you know, it's so interesting. So like your viewers can go back and watch it or listeners can go back and watch it. But it's like everything that I was saying then is true today. And
You're proclaiming it.
Yeah. And I didn't know it at the time because when we did that show, that was the first time I was articulating publicly what we were going to do, right? What we were building. And we were just like at the earliest stages of like proving that this thing needed to exist. And it's so treacherous whenever you start out and do something new. Like you're dealing with the stress of like, are you good enough? There's imposter syndrome. There's like market dynamics. There's money. There's all this stuff, right? That it's like there's 99% of things that can go wrong. But you do it based on the 1% that could go right. And when I think back about that, I think, wow, like that 1% went right. All that stuff went wrong too, right? But like that's okay as long as that 1% goes right. And it did. And where I look at where I'm at now, like I still feel that like we're still in that 1%, you know, what we're tapping into here is something that I think can actually change the world.
I 100% agree. And we're actually going to, before we get into this, which is going to be about the grind over the last 5 years, okay? And talking about the association, we're talking about Kobe and his work ethic, okay? And getting hit and getting back up again. I want to Muhammad, just do a little bit of conversation about what Goodable is, because to me, you have on your shirt, do good, okay? And I'm telling you, everything about Goodable resonates with my mission, my why statement. Everything about it. So you just made a comment now, which is very strong, right? Where it's going to go. And I personally see it going there as well. Why don't you let the viewers know what is Goodable?
Yeah, so let me back it up. So in my career as a journalist, I've basically covered war zones for a very long time. I actually had a house in Afghanistan at one point that I lived in. Like I lived in the middle of a battlefield or a battle zone, so to speak, because Kabul wasn't like people were shooting each other on the streets, but there were bombs going off every couple of days or every couple of weeks or something like that. So I've covered almost every war zone you could think of. Some war zones people don't even know exist. Like I've been there on the ground. I've deployed leading teams more times than I can count to Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, just generally places where bad things were happening, like plane crashes, assassinations, famine, all that stuff. And one day I woke up and I realized that I had become the person on television that told people how bad the world is. And so whenever you saw Muhammad Lila on CNN, and I was on CNN a lot, I think I still have the record to this day of like most number of live shots. I did 220 live shots in the course of 1 month.
Wow.
I remember it was after the Manchester concert attack where a suicide bomber blew himself up at an Ariana Grande concert. And I was on air every hour just reporting the latest. And I was there for like 10 days or 2 weeks. Like after everybody had left, I was still there. And I was really good at it. You know, it's a skill that not too many people have. I can distance myself from the emotional things happening around me. Introverts will know this, right? That introverts don't draw their energy from what goes on around them. They draw it from what's inside them. And so the world could be going to hell around me and I'd just be very calm. I'd be like just drinking it. I'd literally be like in the middle of a battle zone where we just got shot at. And I'd be like, hey, who wants sushi tonight?
You just have peace.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of fatalism that I accept, and I think probably a lot of people who follow sort of like a traditional ideology or religion understand or tend to believe that there's a higher reason for why things happen. We might not understand it, but for most of the time there is. And so for me, it's like, well, you know, none of this is happening randomly. There's some great plan that I don't understand, but it gives you some peace and sort of accepting that there are things you don't know.
I mean, Muhammad, just by hearing that, I'm going to probably assume that you probably do well with anxiety then.
You'd think I should, but no, I think that's not the case. I have tremendous anxiety and it's really high.
Okay.
But the thing about war zones is that you know who the bad guys are, right? It's defined in most battle zones. The military does this all the time, right? When they're doing strategy and tactics, whatever, it's like you know where the threats are coming from. There's probably a similar thing with what you do with like, you know, close personal protection. And when you're setting up, you do security planning. So it's not like you just assign people to like security detail. No, you're doing the pre-risk assessments and all that stuff. And so when, you know, let's say it's like a boxer, right? And they're going into a match. Well, they need security from the moment they leave their hotel, maybe the moment they land at the airport, all the way to the time that they leave and they get back on a plane. And then even on the plane, there's security and all this stuff, right? But all of this stuff is not random, right? Like you're thinking through each step in the way. And so you're analyzing all the threats. You're analyzing, you know, where potential bad things can happen and how do you mitigate all this process, right? I think that's what makes, you know, your team so good. War zones are kind of similar where you know who the bad guys are, you know how they're trying to target you. It's a little bit more difficult in like civilian populations because when they use asymmetrical warfare, you don't know if like, you know, the ice cream guy down the street is actually going to like bomb you.
Right.
So that throws everything kind of, you know, up in the air. But if you're in an active battle space, you know where incoming fire is coming from, right? Like you might not know who's doing it. You might not be able to zero in on specific coordinates, but you know, like in Iraq, you know the bad guys are ISIS.
Right.
You know they have a flag. You know they tend to operate in certain ways. You know which pockets they operate in, all that stuff. So when you know, it sounds crazy because people think war zones are like completely unpredictable. They're more predictable than you think, right? Like, especially when it's like, you know, there's a lull in the fighting. And when there's asymmetrical warfare, it's not like they're going to send an entire brigade of like fighters after you, right? That's not how it works. And you know that like, you know, your enemy, if you poke your enemy, like you're poking a sleeping bear, you know they're going to retaliate.
Right.
But you also know that if you don't poke them, they're happy to just kind of do what they're doing. And so anyways, like, I don't handle anxiety well because I don't handle anxiety when I don't know what's going on. War zones were very different. I knew what was going on. I knew where my safety was. You have this with I bet you have this with a lot of like clients, right? Where, look, if you took like a singer or an actor, they don't know anything about your world. And your team that you assign to provide security for them, or policing or emergency response, whatever that is, like they know that, yo, this person that I'm assigned to protect has no idea about my world, right? They're not going to go in saying, oh, hey, if there's shooting, this guy knows what to do. They don't know that. And so I think the knowledge of of knowing what you don't know is really important. So for me, it was like, look, could I disassemble an AK-47? Sure. Could I do it in under a minute? No, I'd need like 15 minutes or 20, right? Because I'm going back based on memory. But like, could I shoot it at somebody? No. Could I do all these things that people who are trained to do that? Could I do that? No. And so my first thing is, well, I'm going to go to somebody who knows what they're doing and make sure I'm close to them. Mm-hmm. And so even in your cases, it's like, you know, if you're being provided a security detail and you're a VIP and something bad happens, that VIP should know to not run away. You don't run away from your security detail, you run towards them. Mm-hmm. And you let your security detail do what they're going to do, right? And so war zones, there's a way of doing things. It sounds crazy, especially if you're embedded with like a military unit, they know what they're doing.
Okay.
Right? So I would embed with military units and I would be calm as hell because I can control what I can control and the rest is on other people. The difficult part about anxiety is like, man, when you don't know where the threat's coming from, that's scary shit.
Right.
That's really scary, right? Because you just don't know. And COVID kind of did that to everybody, right? Where it was like, who's carrying it? Who's not? Am I going to die? Am I going to live? Like, that was just a weird thing. But going back to the story, so I woke up one day and I realized that like, I didn't want to be that person that was just telling people bad news. I didn't want that for my life. I didn't want that for my family. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want that for the world. And I had to make a choice where I had to say, look, either I go out and I do something that makes the world better, or I convince people that the world is getting worse. And I chose making the world better, and we called it Goodable.
Well, so as a journalist, okay, you hear a lot of times about media, puts on the forefront things that they know are going to gravitate towards, you know, views, right?
Yep.
And that's usually bad things, right?
Yep.
Is that another reason why there's not enough goodness in media right now? It's because it's just not going to bring in the views that they want?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I became obsessed with this question, right? So when I was at CNN, I was like, why is it that we're only showing people bad news? And this was around the time of Trump, during Trump, when things were just negative all the time. And I was like, why don't people cover good news the way that they cover bad news? Like, is it because good news doesn't affect as many people? Well, that's not true. Good news affects perhaps even more people. Is it that there isn't enough good news in the world? Well, that's not true. Good news happens way more often than bad news. So, like, I really hammered down on this question. I'm like, what is it? Why is it that we don't care about good things happening in the world? And I found one study that they had done, I think it was in the 1980s or 90s, one study that tried to explain why news organizations only cover bad news. And the psychology behind it was that when you show people bad things happening elsewhere, in a perverse kind of twist, it makes them feel good because it's not happening to them. So when you would see an earthquake somewhere else, yeah, you might feel bad about it, but inside you'd be like, you'd sigh a breath of relief, or like, oh, yeah, that's not happening to us. Or you'd see shootings, or you'd see this or that, and like it makes them feel in a strange way that like they're better off than those people. And what happened about maybe 8 years ago, maybe even like say 5 years ago, was that everything became so negative that people couldn't breathe. Right? Everybody just doubled down on like, let's show stories of sensationalism and bad news headlines and this and that because they thought they would get more clicks and more revenue. But the opposite effect has happened now, where now almost 40% of everyone in the world has actively avoided the news this past month. That's what the data shows us. So 2 out of every 5 people don't just like say, hey, I don't like the news. They actively avoid it, which means if it's in the room on television, they'll leave the room. And
for the main reason why is they just don't want negativity.
So Reuters actually found that number. Reuters puts out this survey every year where I think they interview like tens of thousands of people in different countries. Like it's a really high number. And so when they found that 40% of people were turning away from the news, the next question is why? What's causing them to do this? And the number one reason why is because it puts them in a bad mood. It puts people in a bad mood. So there's a couple of interesting things. Number one is that, yes, it puts them in a bad mood. But number two is that people are actually have that self-awareness now to say, hey, I'm not going to touch that thing. I'm not going to look at that thing because it puts me in a bad mood. It's just like why people cut down sugar, right? Is that if I have sugar, I'm going to be in a really bad mood. It's just because I've reduced my sugar content, right? Or like, hey, if I drink too much caffeine, if I have too much alcohol or whatever, like they know that there's an action and a reaction. And in this case, the reaction from watching negativity is that it just puts you in a bad mental state. And more people now are saying enough is enough. And that's what we tried to do with Goodable, right? We started building a platform that showcases all of the good things around the world. It was a radical idea because nobody was doing it. It's like the salmon that swim upstream, right? It's like everybody was focusing on negativity. Why don't we just show positive things and see what happens? And what ended up happening was we actually found that we were treating and curing depression.
It's done the actual reverse.
Right.
Of exactly, and of course, there's a lot of studies to showcase that.
Yep.
Your environments dictate how you feel,
yep,
how you think.
And think about this, Constantine, right? It's like the way the media is right now. It's we ran an analysis ourselves, right? So we actually analyzed news headlines at all the big news companies, New York Times, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, and I forget what else. So we did it, more than once. 94% of everything on those websites was negative.
Jeez.
So now ask yourself this: is 94% of everything in the world negative?
No.
It's not even close to that.
No.
Right? In fact, maybe it's even 80% positive or something.
Yeah.
Right? So if that doesn't match with reality, right? If what they're giving you doesn't match with reality, how can you call yourself a journalist?
Interesting.
You're supposed to show people reality.
Right.
But you're not. You're basically taking a tiny little slice of something that happened and you're portraying it as though this is reality, and it's not. And the truth is, if you ask people, do you think there's more good in the world than bad? Most people will say yes. We did our own studies and we asked people, and about 80 to 85% said, yeah, there's much more good in the world than bad. So the question is, why don't we see it?
Why do we highlight it? Why do we highlight the bad so much?
That's right. And the answer is because journalism as a field has abandoned its responsibility to show people reality. It's like the best example that I give is, if you grew up where there was like a circus or a small little amusement park and they had a fun house and you went into the fun house and there's like the
Yes,
music playing and stuff, and they had a hall of mirrors, right? I grew up in Toronto, and I remember Woodbine Mall used to have a hall of mirrors way back in the day. They don't anymore, but they did. And you'd stand in front of these mirrors and they were all distorted. So one mirror would make you look like a tiny little person, and then, another mirror would make you look tall and wide and whatever. And you look at these mirrors and you're like, it's fun and it's cute because you look different. So journalism is supposed to hold up a mirror to society and say, this is what you look like, the good and the bad. So if you're bombing people, if there's a famine, if there's political corruption, whatever, show them that because that's part of who you are. But it's so distorted now that we're not seeing ourselves for who we really are. And the truth is that we're also good people and that good things are happening. And so we just said, let's show people the good things that are happening. And then to your point, which is what you talked about, is if you have somebody who follows you around all day, sits next to you in the car, next to you on the subway, at your dinner table, they're literally like this person that's just everywhere with you, and all they're doing is yelling in your face about how bad the world is, like that'll make you go crazy.
And if I'm happy at that point, it'll bring my energy levels down now too as well.
It's going to destroy your health. It's going to destroy your family. And eventually you're going to start believing what that person is yelling in your face. And that's exactly what's happening today. People are losing their minds. People are losing their jobs, their families. They're picking up weapons and going into shopping malls and shooting people because of this person that's yelling in their face. And that person that's yelling in your face is the news, and you can't get away from it.
It's very contagious. Let me share a very quick story with you. And just to kind of show you about how what you're exposed to can affect your mood and a whole lot of other things. We went to go see a movie with the family. This is probably a couple of months ago. The newest Spider-Man animated movie.
It was great.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I was in a funk watching that movie. So I went with the family. I'm in a funk. As we're leaving, everyone is, because I was in a funk, my mind was blocked, so I wasn't taking the movie in. Okay, I was disconnected on my phone, that kind of stuff. We're in the car right now. My son, my daughter, my wife are all talking about how amazing it was, and it was great. They're laughing, they're giggling. And then my wife says to me, "What'd you think of the movie?" I'm like, "Oh, I thought it sucked."
Wow.
Right? And she goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "I just didn't find it interesting. It was a waste of time." And then as soon as I said that, there was silence in the vehicle for about maybe 35 to 40 seconds. And then the rest of the drive back home, it was just silence.
Yeah.
And then later on, my wife spoke to me about it, but I realized what I had done there. They were so happy, but my negativity, my negative vibes quickly became very contagious, and it casted, and it just killed the moment, right?
Yeah.
Vice versa now. There's other situations where I'll come in acting like a jackass, very happy, very excited, and that exact same contagious vibe gets onto them, and they're just suddenly, their moods are boosted up. So when we see media now, is what you're saying as the example, and all we're getting fed is negativity, would I'd rather watch a video about, a couple of people fighting because I know I'm going to gravitate towards that video, or what if I watch something about something kind that somebody did?
So take it a step further now, right? Let's say you're actually struggling with a serious issue. Let's say you're suicidal, or let's say you're homicidal, right? And we've seen this in Canada, right? Where there was this in London, Ontario. There was a young guy, I think he was 19 or 20, something really young, who ran over a Muslim family because they were Muslim. And it's clear why he did it. Like, he came out and he said, "Yeah, I did it. And I did it because, I started reading all this stuff online." He went down the rabbit hole. He said, "I went down the rabbit hole." And so now let's say you're about to do something bad. Let's say you're about to harm yourself, or you're about to harm someone else because you're in that state, right? And the end result of that state that you were talking about is like, look, what happened to you in the movies, like that happens to all of us. But we have a mechanism to stop us from hurting somebody else, right? Hopefully most of us do. Mm-hmm. But that just gets chipped away and chipped away and chipped away until eventually you snap, right? If you don't have those mechanisms in your life to restrain your psychological state, eventually you snap. And that's when really bad things happen. Now, just before you're going to snap, I wonder, I don't know if this would have happened with this person in London, or, anybody that walks into a shopping mall. Let's say somebody walks into a shopping mall in Texas because they hear, all these illegal immigrants are taking jobs, and they find a mall and they shoot people up because he thinks they're all illegal immigrants. What if you could pull that guy aside, like the morning that he was doing it, when he was putting up their ammunition in his car, and just show that person something good that, these undocumented people had done. Like, hey, yeah, these people are, considered illegal aliens in the U.S., but they're running the soup kitchen that's feeding all these people who lost their jobs, right? Like, could you create that intervention, and could you make it successful enough that it actually changes that person's mind? And the truth is, we don't know. We don't know because nobody's tried delivering those interventions through the news. Mm-hmm. And so we said, what if we could? What if I could text message somebody every morning and give them a reason to get out of bed? What if I could text message them every night at 9 p.m. to give them like a wind down exercise that makes them feel like the world is getting better and shows them that the world is getting better? What difference would we make in people's lives? And we have people that have messaged us from all over the world saying, "Hey, you don't know this, but I'm alive today because of you." And that's the best feeling in the world. I guess you guys do that all the time, right? There probably are a lot of clients that you have that are physically alive because of what your teams do out there on the ground. But, for anybody that goes into, there's a great, nobody goes into policing because they want to make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. That's never the driving force.
That's right.
It's never because, I want to run the sirens, right? Or like, there's always like a thing where it's like, you want to help somehow. There's something in you where it's like, I think I have something to offer the world, and this is the way that I can offer it. And it's the best feeling in the world to know that you've helped somebody, or they're alive today, or maybe you just gave them a ride home from, maybe they just got divorced or fired and you gave them a ride home and it made a difference in their life. Like, that's what life's about, Mm-hmm. It's about making the world better.
Mm-hmm. And look, to me, what's so profound about this, it's the stuff that you're doing, Muhammad, with Goodable is simple. Yeah. It's not like it's brain science. What I mean is, like, you're just exposing the goodness of things. And I sent you a text a couple of weeks ago, And like many people, I have my phone very close to me before
Sure.
I go to sleep.
Sure.
And I used to see my wife wake up in the morning, and they say I used to because it's hard to wake up 4:35 in the morning and do what Michelle Obama does, for example, and go into meditation, the whole nine. But I used to see that, and she would tell me she gets up just to fill her mind with positivity, goodness, read a book, the whole nine. Well, I wake up in the morning, and I'll usually just tend to scroll mindlessly on social media, and it's going nowhere,
Yeah.
right?
A lot of us do that.
Well, yeah, but when you really start like breaking about how do I feel, because that's the key, is how do I feel when I'm looking at this,
Yeah.
right? And I started realizing that I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was feeling empty, and then it just so happened that I saw a post on LinkedIn from Arlene Dickinson talking about, things that I already know. So sometimes the answer's in your face,
Yeah.
and you just need someone else to help you see it. And I saw this app called Goodable, which I know exists, and it's all centered around goodness, good content. And I started to look at that and realizing that, wow, my mood is being shifted just by reading a couple or watching a couple of good, positive stories.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. One of the things that we don't talk about publicly, but we'll be releasing soon, is we actually ran Goodable through clinical trials. The same way that you would run a clinical trial for a vaccine, for a drug, for an intervention, for therapy, we did the exact same thing with Goodable. And we ran it through state-of-the-art, industry-leading methodology. So we had a control group, we had experiment groups, we had like a placebo group, we had all of those things. And one group, for example, looked at neutral news, one group looked at hours, one group looked at negative news, one group did nothing. And we tested them along the way. And so the first clinical trial that we ran, so in psychology, there are scales where you can measure depression, anxiety, happiness, well-being. There's a whole bunch of different ones, and they're industry standard scales. So we tested Goodable, and we tested people on those scales, and when we looked at the numbers, we were blown away. So there's a scale for like happiness/well-being, and what we found was that on immediate exposure to Goodable, meaning just one story or one video, the happiness rate would be increased by about 96%.
Wow.
So we looked at this number
Wow.
and we're like, so we can make somebody 96% happier just by showing them something positive. And the answer was yes, because the data was showing from all the users and participants that ran through the survey that we were doing that. So we said, well, wait a minute, this is so powerful. What happens if we give them prolonged exposure? So it's not just a one-off. It's like, what if we can create a habit or a routine in somebody where we give them exposure to positivity for just a few minutes a day? And we tested it over 10 days. And the numbers showed that we could reduce depression symptoms by about 25%. Wow. Now remember, there's no medication involved. There's no side effects.
Yes.
There's no age limitations or restrictions. There's no big pharma making a lot of money off of this.
Right.
It's literally just, we created an intervention that introduces positivity into somebody's life. And if we could treat depression by 25%, of course big pharma is going to come after us. Because what we're saying now is, hey, like, our results can be comparable to your antidepressants that you're making billions of dollars off of. So we're very careful about how we talk about these results, but we know we're sitting on something very powerful, and you described it in the exact right way. It's incredibly simple. It's there. What's the magic behind what Goodable does?
Right.
It's we make people happy. Like, sure, there's a science behind it, but at the end of the day, it's like, just make people happy. There's a movie called Patch Adams.
I love that. Adams.
Right?
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams.
Yeah, that's right.
Amazing performance in
Yes.
it, right? What was it called? Patch Adams? Or
It was.
that the character? Okay.
Yeah.
So he plays a doctor, for those who are watching and listening and don't know, and a brilliant doctor gets into like one of the best medical schools, and he starts volunteering or doing his hours, his residency hours at a hospital. And he realizes that the way that doctors treat patients is very impersonal. And the patients are usually like pretty down, right? They're pretty sad because of what they're going through. So he goes in and he starts cheering them up. And he goes in, he like wears a clown outfit and he does all this stuff. And Robin Williams, you can tell, was great at this role. And then he realizes that, like, the secret to like actually treating people's physical health is actually improving their mental health. And I met the real Patch Adams once. So
Really?
Robin Williams played the character. I met the real Patch Adams. He was giving a talk, And then I interviewed him after as a journalist. And I pulled him aside. And I'll never forget something he told me. He said, I've never met somebody who was so depressed that a simple conversation couldn't help them.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, like here's a guy who's like in the hospitals. He's on the front lines, and he's like, sometimes all you need is just a simple conversation with somebody. Make them feel important. And we live in a world where we like looking for complex solutions.
Yeah.
Right? But like sometimes it's like in front of you the whole time.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, 100. Look, to me, another person that you mentioned about the Patch Adams, but we had a guy on the show recently, about a couple of months ago. His name is Dr. Brian Goldman, written a book, The Power of Kindness. And he talks about, you know, everything that he does, especially when doctors leading by empathy, right? And it becomes very common to get cold in your responses dealing with people that are asking the same questions. And he snapped on a patient once, or on a patient's family, and the family came up and said, just want to let you know that, you know, you were very insensitive to the issue. And that hit him so hard that it inspired him to look at things differently.
Wow.
So the stuff that Goodable is doing right now, it also helps you change perspective as well, right? In the way you're looking at something. That's what I love about it. What do you do, Muhammad, with your team to like look for goodness? Like, are you like, how are you like casting this wide net to say, I need to start, like, how do you gravitate towards goodness to bring it and expose it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually have more engineers and developers and machine learning scientists than we have journalists on our team. Like we actually have very few journalists on our team. The rest are all technical. Mm-hmm. And so we built a model that allows us to immediately detect and classify whenever good news happens anywhere in the world.
Amazing.
And what that means is like, look, if CNN has 100 stories right now on their website, we can instantly scan them, and each story will give us a score out of 100 for how happy it is. So if you think of like Yelp or Google reviews or Rotten Tomatoes, you know, Rotten Tomatoes is the big one because you want to know if the movie's good. Like was Spider-Man good? It was probably 98%,
yeah, it
right?
was.
Because it's really high, right?
It was right up there.
So you were wrong. It was a good movie. But,
it was.
But, you know, so we do the same thing
Yes.
with news. So we can actually look at a story, and we've trained the algorithms ourselves with sort of like a news mindset. And we look at the story, and it'll tell us, is this 100% positive? Is this 80% positive? Is it 0% positive? We take all of that data, and then we optimize that content so that you can digest it very quickly. You know, in medicine, I forget what the term is, right? But it's like a delivery mechanism. So it's like, what's the fastest way to absorb this into your body? Is it a drink? Is it, you know, a protein shake? Is it a pill? Is it something else?
Needle.
A needle, right? All these different ways. Because sometimes you need to see the effect really quickly, right? And so for us, it's like, well, what's the fastest way for us to get this into your brain? You're not going to have time to read a 3,000-word essay from the New Yorker or the Atlantic or something. But everybody's got, you know, 3 minutes during the day. So what we do is we take all the positivity, we summarize it, and we give it back to you in less than 5 minutes a day. And so if you start your morning with us, we'll give you, you know, a 4-minute reading list or videos or whatever it is that will start your day off right. And because we've done it through technology, we can scale for as big as we want. You know this, right? When you're running an organization that deals with people, it's very difficult to scale people because you could have one person that's exceptional, but you can't just replicate that person.
That's right.
Right? So if you're leading a team, it gets difficult to scale. But when you do it through technology, it's very easy to scale because the results will always be consistent. There's a set cost. You know exactly what everything costs, and it becomes possible to scale. So that's what we do. We basically use... We analyze all the news content that's out there, and then we take it, we decide if it's positive, and then we optimize it to improve your mental health in as short amount of time as we can.
No, it's good. And Goodable right now also is in a lot of public settings that you can go to, right?
Yeah, like we have a lot of distribution deals with screen display companies. We even have a TV channel that we don't talk about enough, but you know, it's like if you walk into a doctor's office or a hospital or a shopping mall, there's tons of screens.
Or an elevator.
Yeah. Right? Like all these, think of all the places where you see a screen during the day. You forget about your phone. You probably see a screen 15 times a day without even realizing it.
Right.
When you're driving, when you're parking, when you're paying for something, you're looking at these screens. And if you're looking at a screen that has content on it, like in an elevator or in a public place or a shopping mall lobby, that screen is probably managed by a company that decides what goes onto those screens. And so when we launched Goodable, pretty much all of those screen display companies came to us and said, whoa, like this is so new. What are you guys doing? And we said, well, here's how it works, and we make people happy. And so they came to us and they said, whoa, can you make shoppers at our malls happy? Can you make patients waiting in the doctor's office happy? Can you make students coming into school and seeing like school screens happy? And the answer to all of them was like, of course we can. And so they came to us and they said, can we start putting Goodable on our screens? And of course we worked out deals with all of them. And so what happens is, all of those people who see the screens, in business world you call them stakeholders, but they become happy almost instantly. And because of that, Goodable, I don't know what our numbers are this month, but in general this year we've regularly been able to crack more than 100 million impressions per month.
Oh my goodness.
And what that means is an impression is every time your content appears on a screen. Could be a phone, television, whatever it is. 100 million is what we're looking at per month, which is massive.
That's insane.
From where we were 5 years ago when we were just talking about, hey, here's how this might change the world. We're at 100 million now. I hope we'll get to 1 billion at some point.
Well, it's been a journey because, again, you know, we talk about this journey 5-6 years later where it's at right now. Can I ask you, how do you feel? How do you feel knowing that from inception to the evolvement to where it is right now?
Do you want to hear the answer?
Yes, I want to.
I feel nothing.
Really?
I feel nothing. I'm grateful.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. I'm deeply grateful. But I feel nothing, and I won't feel anything until we change the world.
Okay, so let's go there then. If you feel nothing right now, and you're saying that this is where you'd like to see it head off to, and because when we speak into existence, things will go in that direction, where do you say you want to see it spill all four corners of the earth? How? Like, not to say how it's going to happen, but like in what capacity?
Yeah,
like screens.
It's a great question. I think what I'd like to see is a few things. I'll start with the easiest first. I think there will be some sort of television channel that's available 24 hours a day that will give people a choice between watching CNN and watching Goodable. You can click channel 33, you can click channel 34, one's CNN, one is us, and people will have a choice. And I guarantee you that we will have enough people choosing healthy, positive for your mind rather than negative to become a massive company. But that's not where my interest is. My real interest is in our big vision at Goodable is so much bigger than anybody thinks it is. I think we can create a layer of technology that's used by every single person online. And here's what I mean. We're exposed to negativity every day, every moment that we're on the internet. Even if we choose not to, you're still exposed to it. I think Goodable will act as sort of like an ultimate filter that can filter out any negativity through any online experience that you have. It can be shopping. It can be selling something. It can be the ads that you're watching. It can be your DMs that you're getting from your friends. It can be the news. The news is actually the easiest thing to do for us. But our goal is that we want to build a fundamental layer of technology that everybody can use. So, for example,
like a white blood cell.
Like a red blood cell. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But in practical terms, it would be, the algorithm that we've designed.
Yes. That
can basically be applied anywhere. And the reason why is we don't focus on the content. Content's really hard to scale, right? There's only one of me. I can only do so many videos before I run out of time during the day. But if you build the algorithms and you prove that the algorithms can deliver mental health outcomes, you can scale that to infinity. And so I think Goodable will be something that can treat any mental health condition, make employees more productive, prevent people from calling in sick. It can deliver all of these things with full scalability and no side effects, and it can be delivered to any screen or device anywhere in the world. That's the big vision, is taking everything negative that's around us and building a barrier between us and that, and saying that negative stuff that people are making money off of to get to me, I can fight that off.
Wow.
That's the vision.
If someone's mindset was to shift something like this that you just described right now, it would change humanity.
I agree.
It would change humanity completely.
And now think of all the people that'll come after you when you're trying.
Right.
How many people make money from negativity? It's a ton of people, right?
Well, let's look at cigarettes, for example. The fact that we know that they can kill you, and there's been studies over and over again, the fact that they're still there and promoting
Yep.
goes to show you that things are off.
It's, you know, it's funny, right? Because we know cigarettes can kill you. I bet you that constantly consuming certain types of news can kill you also.
100%.
Right? Like early heart attack
Yes.
or just like mental health situations, like stuff. I think that there's probably enough evidence to say that it is killing you for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we ever talk about that? Why doesn't anybody ever talk about the fact that, like, what's all the negative effect of all of this that we're doing? And for us, it's, we know we're doing something right because things are happening without us even planning them. And I tell my team a lot, like, just,
Or when you're disrupting and you can see the effects of when you're disrupting in a positive way when
Right.
it's not being received well.
it's like, I'll give you an example, right? So I can't talk about this publicly, but a major social media platform came to us and said, hey, we really love what you're doing. And I said, great. Like, you know, we should talk. And they basically said, look, like, you know, we're trying to improve the happiness of our platform because, you know, a lot of these social media platforms, they're primarily negative. And so they said, we really like what you're doing and we'd like to have a conversation. So without getting into details about where the conversation went, it's like, I didn't know who these people were. They came to us. Mm-hmm. All these screen display providers, they came to us. And they said, we really love what you're doing. We see the effects of what you're doing in a very obvious, practical way. So I tell my team all the time, just focus on helping people and the rest will take care of itself. You know, like that's the definition of karma, right? Just put good out into the world and somehow, in some way, it'll come back to you. And it'll come back to you tenfold. And so as long as we just keep helping people, I think we'll be okay.
Well, what could the average person who is a big supporter, like myself, okay, of what you're doing, and if I wanted to help, what could I do?
You mean like help, like just
how could I, like, outside of telling people about Goodable, how can I contribute? Because look, everything that I do in my life and everything that our organization does is done with one thing, and that is to help others. Okay, so this is why I say everything that you're doing really resonates with me, because that's in the fabrics of my DNA, and because I've seen how people can change to that positivity. When I hear about what you're doing, how could someone like myself, if I wanted to, help provide something to contribute, either content or financially or anything of that sort? Like, what could someone do that wants to help the cause? Because I find that more and more, as much as something is good, is that a lot of people sometimes don't really understand what it takes to make it.
Yeah.
What it takes to get it there, to get it to that size.
So there's so many ways to answer that question, right? On the most basic level, if you're just a person, just be a good person. Like, forget about financially helping Goodable or whatever. It's like, if you are a good person and you're putting good out into the world, and that's what you can do, then do it, right? Just focus on, hold the door open or ask people how their day was, like the stuff that we take for granted, right? Or maybe go and talk to somebody at work that you haven't talked to before, just be good. Just be selfless and giving, and don't ask for anything in return. Just be a good person. That's really hard. Not everybody can do it, but everybody can try. If you know somebody who's depressed or suffers from anxiety or is kind of just going through a rough patch in life, you should download the app. You should download it immediately and start using it. And don't use it. You don't need to use it multiple times a day. It's not Twitter. It's not Facebook. It's like a one-time thing, right? Check it in the morning, check it in the afternoon, and force yourself to do it, because in the beginning, when you're forming a new habit, the most important thing is consistency. Right? And most people don't take medicine. Like, if a doctor prescribes medicine, it's really hard to take the entire course of antibiotics. The statistics show that people don't. But if you can just start, what you'll see is you'll notice the difference right away. So I would say that if you're struggling, or somebody in your family who's struggling, have them download the Goodable app.
Is it in different languages, Goodable, or is it just in English?
Not yet.
Okay.
So what we found was, like, when you're classifying happiness, it's easy to do it in English. It's really hard in other languages.
Right.
Because they have phrases that sound really bad.
Right.
but they actually are positive. So
Right,
there are
right.
translation issues across the board. But and then I would say upgrade to Goodable Plus.
Okay.
So Goodable Plus actually right now has a promotion where the annual subscription is about 25% off.
Mm-hmm.
But we work with influencers like Arlene Dickinson and others
Mm-hmm.
who actually have special promotional offers. So if you happen to snag one of those codes online, you'll end up with 50% off the subscription.
Okay.
So it's a great deal. If you run an organization, we come through this a lot. We're like, all these big organizations need to show that they're doing good in the world. It's not enough for them to say it. They have to show it. And they have to show people that they're investing in infrastructure or girls' education or all these like things that they're doing to make the world better, or like athletic facilities in Africa, or like I suppose there's probably a lot of that in policing. I think you're doing that too with the arena, right?
Right.
Which is like just opening it up and like creating sort of a wholesome experience for people, right? To be their full selves,
Right.
To develop professionally, mentally, spiritually, all those things, right? So if you're an organization that like wants to show the good that you're doing in the world, then they should call me. And let's start talking about ways that like we can show people the good that you're doing in the world. And we have partnerships right now where we're working with companies that are transforming the world. One of our partnerships is with a company that's backed by Mark Cuban and Bill Gates and LeBron James.
Oh, nice.
Like, what a weird
Combination. Yeah.
right? But they're transforming farming. They're basically turning farming from like they're transforming farming to a process that's completely carbon neutral. So if you think about all the farming in the world and the oil and the diesel and the cow burps and all that stuff and how it creates carbon emissions, what if you could take that process and make it entirely carbon neutral? How much would that change the planet? So that's a great example of like a partnership for us where like they come to us and they're like, hey, we're doing this thing. And we're like, wow, it's legit. We love it. Let's partner. And so I would say to those people, like, we should talk.
Okay.
For those people that want to help.
I love that. Look, I think if people really break this down in the sense of if you're a smoker and you invest in cigarettes, if you're a drinker and you invest in alcohol or coffee or an experience, for example, if you think about, we do this every single day, right? And, I think the subscription before the discounts on Goodable, I can't remember, I think it's like $70 or something like that for the year. Or
yeah,
$80.
the annual is around 60.
Okay. If you think about what that means, it's peanuts. It's
peanuts.
Nothing. It's absolutely nothing in comparison, right? And I think when we do the reverse now, where we buy a subscription to a gym membership, or where we go get a massage, or we do all this, we're doing this to better ourselves. Like, I, for example, need to get a massage so I can feel better, right? So from something like this, it's such a nominal thing to say, I'm going to pay for something as a subscription base, and I'm going to inject my mindset right now that not only will help make me feel good, but it can create opportunities for myself right now.
I talk to people in healthcare. So we have like advisors and stuff, and everybody in healthcare is like, why are you charging so little for this? Because they look at our healthcare data and they're like, whoa, you guys can deliver these kinds of results and like treat depression and cure suicidal ideations and stuff. And we're like, yeah. And they're like, how much do you charge? And I'm like, it's the equivalent of like one Starbucks per month. It's like the one latte per month,
Exactly.
right? And they're like, what are you, crazy? You should be charging like hundreds of dollars. I'm like, my question is why? And they would say, because that's what healthcare companies charge now. Right? So, an average person who suffers from depression bills more than $3,000 a year in antidepressant costs in the United States.
Wow.
So their healthcare insurance companies pay something like $3,300 a year just for the antidepressants. That doesn't include therapy. That doesn't include CBT. That doesn't include all that other stuff that takes place. It's just the antidepressants. So all of these healthcare people come to us and they're like, why are you charging so low? And my answer is because I can. Because we're trying to be a company that makes the world better. And we're not out to make billions of dollars. Hey, that'd be great if we could, and I think we'll be massively profitable, but we don't need to. Same thing, like Mark Cuban did this thing with online pharmacies. I don't know if you've seen it, right? But he created this online pharmacy that takes generic drugs and offers them at like 2% of what all the other pharmacies are charging people. And he's like, I'm doing this because like I want to make the world better, and we're still going to be profitable anyway, so we don't need to be those pharmaceutical companies that make billions.
That's right.
We can still do very well for ourselves. And we kind of take the same approach.
I love that. And that's why to me, whenever you do something, I mean, I can speak for myself and and probably can speak for you because I know you, but you lead by goodness because that's kind of what your passion is. And, everything else that comes from it is secondary. It's all secondary. The number one reason why you do is just to do it, just to lead by it.
Yeah.
And that is contagious, man. That is contagious.
I feel like you could teach me a lot on that. This whole like being a CEO is new to me. I've always led teams out in the field, but I was always carrying out orders. I knew what to do, right? I think, you're an interesting example because you have such a mission-driven company, right? It's like when I think of Sentinel, I'm like, this is mission-driven, right? It's not like all the other stuff that you have to do running a company is still there. You got to make a profit. You got to retain your staff. You got to train, all that stuff, right?
Right.
But I think what's interesting about you is that it's so mission-driven. It's like, how do I take somebody and help them help others?
Right.
Right? It's like they have this desire in them that they want to make the world better. How do you take that, channel that, magnify that, and then put them in a place to succeed? I'm still figuring out how to do all these things, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. What you're talking about is servant leadership.
Yeah.
Right? Which is basically your what you're trying to do is not become an authoritative, do this, but let me make you the best version of yourself. Let me show you by example. Let me support you. And then you become this excellence based on that. The other side of it, I think also is, there's a quote by Simon Sinek. He says, don't do business with people that want what you have. Do business with people that believe what you believe. And if you think about this, I think for the most part, if you were to ask anybody, if there's a stat that exists, would you prefer there to be around people that are positive or negative? I think everyone would universally say positive.
Yeah, sure.
Do you see what I'm saying? And I think that's a big part of it. That's a very big part of it. So to surround yourself into doing what you're doing, I mean, I'm pretty sure your entire team is all like very, like you love being around them because they're just so positive, uplifted, and they're all very similar mission minded.
It's like, it's so interesting because reality is hard and life is hard. You can't predict when you're going to get sick. You can't predict when somebody dies. You can't predict issues at home with kids or your wife or your spouse, your partner. Like there's all this stuff that like, it's really, really damn hard. If you're alive, I think the Buddhists had it right where existence is suffering, because if you exist, you cannot avoid suffering, right? In the old days, it's like there was a storm and you lived in a shed. Right. You were suffering, man. Like if you lived, look at all these hurricanes that happened in Florida. Like what the hell did people do before they had homes and earthquake-proof buildings and stuff? Like you suffered, right? And so I think suffering is a part of life. And nobody says you should bury your head in the sand and pretend these things don't exist. And, we all know people in our lives that are like a little bit too positive, right? It's like, bro, you're not tuned into reality here. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Right? It's like you look at these people and like there's something that's
annoyingly positive.
And you want to grab them by like the buttons on their shirt and shake them and be like, bro, like this is real. I need you here now because the roof is leaking.
Right.
So nobody says like, I think the trick to being positive is not that you're positive like all the time in all situations. It's that there's an underlying sense of being in the moment. And we were talking about Kobe. So Kobe did an interview once where he talked about, where he was asked a great question. He was asked, you're down by 2 or you're down by 3 and you're supposed to win. And up until that point, you were getting your ass whooped. And you're still down by 2 or 3 and you go to the timeout. What's going through your mind in the timeout, right? Are you thinking about how bad you played? Are you thinking about the next game? Are you thinking about what went wrong? And Kobe goes, I'm not thinking about any of that. And then you stop and you're like, well, what's going on here? What's he thinking about? He goes, the only thing I'm thinking about is that moment right there now. I'm not thinking about all the shots that I missed. I'm not thinking about how bad my back is hurt right now. I'm not thinking about all of the other things that could have happened because it doesn't matter. All that happens is that moment that you're in right now. And he talked about how this is why the Lakers three-peated. And then when Shaq left, they won another 2 titles. He said, when we went into the timeout as a team, when the timeout was over, we came back into the court. We were so focused on winning that possession, on winning that play, because we were able to zone out everything else.
Right.
And I think that's the secret, right?
Yeah.
It's like you just got to be in that moment, and there's a kind of calmness that takes place for people who can live in that moment. And it's really hard. Nobody has it perfectly, but we've all worked for people and have people in our lives that exude that calmness. And I don't know, that's how I try to live, man.
No, man, look, I love that. As you're talking today, this whole episode, I think I think about what I'm about to tell you right now quite a bit. And I think about when Hitler was a child. I think of when Osama bin Laden was a child. I think of the bad people of our society when they were children. I always go right to when they're young. And that's when the child is supposed to be innocent, right? And obviously upbringings, environments can start to change the pathway for an individual, and their mind starts kind of getting ahead of them. That's why, for example, racism can be basically taught at a young age opposed to, learned. And I look at that and I say to myself, imagine if the bad people of our society right now that are going to be potentially going down the footsteps of where some of these individuals in society did, how something like this can change the narrative.
Yeah.
Can stop it. I think about that a lot, man. And to me, this is why the influence of positivity is so important.
Yeah, we have a ton of parents who subscribe to Goodable because of their kids, right? And so we launched an audio feature on Goodable. We're about to actually launch the world's biggest audio library of happy expert content. So we're actually having like top wellness experts, top athletes, top influencers, celebrities, you name it, teach us how to be happy. So like, for example, we would pull aside somebody like, we did one with Mick Foley, who's a famous WWE wrestler. And his motto was have a nice day. Yeah. So we sat back and we said, well, how do you have a nice day? Like, what do you have to say about having a nice day? So we have all of these people that have given us courses or sessions or whatever you call it, which is like, hey, if I'm having a bad day, how do I turn it around? Well, let's ask Mick Foley. And so we've built this audio library that we're going to be releasing very soon. In fact, maybe even before this is pushed online, it'll be released. And you can't do these things alone. You always need a little bit of support. But we have a ton of parents that come to us and they're like, yo, my kid's going through a difficult time in school, right? Or they're getting bullied, or there's just too much social media around them. And I need to give them some sort of alternative to counteract all the poison that and it's not their fault, right? The poison comes into you whether you want it or not. And so they're like, I just need something to counteract all this negativity. And that's why I subscribe to Goodable. And I have kids. I mean, I worry about the world that they're growing up in. I worry about social media. I think every parent does. And our kids' generation, and you've got kids too, right? So like their generation is going to have such a more difficult time than we did. I don't know what my friends I don't know what my friends wear on the weekends when I was growing up.
Right.
I didn't know where they were going to eat.
Right.
I didn't know all of this stuff, and I didn't care.
Right.
They know every detail about where their friends went this weekend, what was their Instagram story, what rides they went to at Wonderland. Like they know all this stuff, right? And we weren't meant to know all this stuff about everybody, but suddenly now they do. And there's a whole lot of mental health stuff going on with that generation that's really scary. And hopefully we can be part of that solution where we can help guide people towards something that's a little bit more wholesome.
Amazing, man. Well, to close, 5 years ago, you mentioned the concept of Goodable. Where would you see yourself when we do this podcast in 5 years' time from now, so in 2028?
Okay, let me flip it on you, and I'm going to say that Sentinel is going to have its own film studio somewhere downtown in Toronto. You're going to be this massive. Yeah. You're going to be doing live events with like all these famous people, because you guys have grown and expanded quite a bit since we last spoke to. If your audience even knows, like when we met, the office that you were in was like 2% or 5% of where you guys are now. So you've really grown.
Thank you.
So I think when we meet 5 years from now, it'll be very different for both of us.
We'll have gray beards.
I've got gray beard. There's some grays growing in here. Okay. But I think for Goodable, right now there's around 11 people that are alive today because of us.
Man,
That's
so good.
that's the number I remember,
Okay.
right? And now the crazy thing is like, you know, as you're preparing people for what you do for careers in policing, what you do, that number is probably much higher than 11. You don't realize it, right?
yeah.
But like what you've done and those people that have gone on to do what they do, how many people have they kept alive? Probably way more than 11.
Wow.
Right?
It's like a domino effect of goodness.
So if you think about that, that's the effect of what you're doing. Right now we're at 11. I hope that 5 years from now we'll be in the hundreds or maybe even the thousands.
Okay.
Where we'll have people that will come to us and say, I would never have made it through my depression. I would have never have made it through my hospitalization, or I would have never made it through this really difficult period in my life without Goodable. And that's where I think we'll be in 5 years.
I love it. How do we find Goodable? Just so you can throw.
Just go to the App Store. So the first thing is the best experience for Goodable is through the app. It's completely free on iOS and Android. Just go to the App Store, download Goodable. If you subscribe to Goodable Plus, which gives you unlimited audio, unlimited expert sessions, and a daily designed experience. So our best mental health benefits are when you subscribe to Goodable Plus. So download it, subscribe to Goodable Plus. It's a 1 week free trial. If you don't like it, you can cancel anytime. If you decide to continue, it's less than the cost of a Starbucks latte per month.
Okay.
That's where you would find us. And then secondly, just find us on social media. We're on every platform. Just search for Goodable. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram's growing really fast, and TikTok. Just find us in all those places.
Amazing. Okay. And even though some of the audience listening may not be a subscriber, is there anything that you could throw in as a pre-subscribe, little bit of little bit of goodness? Is there any little bit of goodness you can throw to somebody right now and hearing that maybe you can change something in their day?
So why don't we do this?
Okay.
I'll make you an offer.
Okay.
Okay. In the podcast, I will create a special invitation for all of your listeners.
Okay.
And anybody that's connected to Sentinel.
Okay.
I would imagine that it's a really high stress industry where you're dealing with, and there's
yes.
people with a lot of stress. I'll create a special code right now, and I'll call it Sentinel 25.
Okay.
Okay. So if you go to the app and you download it, you go through this like onboarding screen, and there's a page that says, "Do you have an invite code?"
Okay.
I will create an invite code that says Sentinel 25. That gives anyone who uses it an extra 25% off.
Amazing.
Of the existing discount. So it works out to be about 50% off. Anybody that uses that, my investor's not going to like this. My team's not going to like this either. Anybody that uses that, I will take a portion of that revenue and I'll give it back to you so you can use to help them, to help more people, because I feel like when you help people that do good, it increases. So I'll take a portion of that, something like half of the revenue or a third of the revenue. We'll figure that out just so that we're not losing money. And I'll give it back to you. And you can use it to help people become better police officers, better security personnel, whatever that is. And if you don't want to do that, then take it and pay it forward to somebody else.
Amazing. I mean, we do a lot of work with like Crime Stoppers and stuff like that. I think
Perfect.
it'd be amazing. Wow. That's amazing, Muhammad. That's incredible nice gesture that you provided there. And we'll put the links on this afterwards. But to me, I love it, man. I honestly think a kind gesture like this, I would like to do something as well. So I'm thinking just to get creative, maybe we'll link right after this podcast. But I think with the stuff that you're putting out right now is amazing. Again, I'm sold as an individual. I'm a user of Goodable. And I need, as an example, telling all CEOs for their organizations, one of the things that we hear in our leadership, I'm part of a forum group, CEO McCain forum group. They say leadership is lonely at the top. Okay. And there's not a lot of people that, can just have a conversation to relate with someone. So we all go through our moments. And I can tell you, for me, as a personal testimony to Goodable, the platform that you guys have and the information is important for me. Because if I'm not in a positive mindset, I know I can come into my boardroom on a Monday morning and I have the power to make everybody happy, excited, or I have the complete power to do the complete opposite. Because if I'm feeling down, I'm going to just let that out, not intentionally, and they're all going to be down. So it's vital. It's vital, I think, for leadership to have this square foundation, because we all have our days, right? And if we're going to get lonely, let lonely now meet Goodable.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I love it. Listen, man, thanks for having me on. And
Yeah,
five years from now, we're going to do this again.
We are. Ladies and gentlemen, Muhammad Lila from Goodable. I want to thank everyone right now that is going to be gravitating towards this, and I cannot wait for our world to have a little bit more good. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, Muhammad. Thank you very much for your time, brother.
Thanks, bro.
All right, guys, take care.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.